For decades, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, once the Duke of York, moved through life shielded by royal privilege, ceremony, and unquestioned authority, a figure whose every word and gesture commanded attention and respect. But in early 2026, that carefully constructed world began to crumble. Stripped of titles, security, and the grand estates that had long defined his identity, Andrew found himself confined to a modest farmhouse on the Sandringham estate, far from the pomp and public admiration that had surrounded him since birth. Behind closed doors, secrets the royal family had desperately tried to bury began to surface. Truths that revealed the stark reality of a monarchy willing to sacrifice even its most senior members to preserve its image. From the quiet halls of Wood Farm, Andrew now confronts a life of isolation and reflection, haunted by the contrast between his past influence and present invisibility. Each day is a reminder of the fragility of power, a meditation on privilege lost, and a silent reckoning with a family institution that places a crown above loyalty. Observers note the deliberate precision of the palace's actions, a public yet calculated dismantling of Andrew's world, ensuring that the man who once moved among royalty with certainty is now exposed, vulnerable, and unable to rely on the shields that once protected him. This is more than a story of personal downfall. It is a narrative about accountability, transparency, and the consequences of actions long ignored. Andrew's revelations, whispered to the world and confirmed in public, challenged the monarchy's carefully curated image, forcing both insiders and observers to reconsider what loyalty, power, and justice mean within one of the oldest institutions on the planet. As Andrew speaks, the world listens, realizing that even royalty is not beyond scrutiny and that the secrets once buried in palace walls can, when revealed, shift the perception of history, honor, and authority forever. His journey from golden prince to isolated figure at Wood Farm serves as a cautionary tale, demonstrating that no legacy, no matter how storied, can withstand the relentless gaze of truth, public accountability, and the passage of time. In this story, every title stripped, every privilege revoked, and every protective barrier removed carries a message that power is not eternal, that reputation is fragile, and that the cost of concealment is always greater than the cost of disclosure. As Andrew lays bare what the royals tried to bury, he forces the monarchy, the media, and the public to confront the uncomfortable reality of unchecked privilege and the human consequences that lie behind ceremonial grandeur. What emerges is not merely scandal, but a profound examination of the tension between family loyalty, institutional survival, and moral responsibility. A story that is as unsettling as it is revealing, a story that will resonate for generations to come, reminding all who watch that even the untouchable can be made to answer for their actions, and that the secrets of the powerful, once exposed, can no longer be ignored. In the quiet, sprawling fields of Sandringham, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, once the Duke of York, confronts a life unrecognizable from the world he once commanded, a life stripped of grandeur, titles, and influence, leaving him isolated in the modest farmhouse of Wood Farm, far removed from the ceremonial pomp that had defined his existence. For decades, he moved through life protected by privilege, shielded by his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, and elevated by the centuries-old institution of the British monarchy, a world where royal blood and lineage insulated him from the ordinary consequences that governed the rest of society. Yet in early 2026, the carefully curated facade of protection disintegrated. Titles were rescinded, protective staff removed, and the grand estate of Royal Lodge, once a symbol of his unquestioned status and ceremonial power, was taken from him, signaling a dramatic and irrevocable shift in his life. The palace's actions were deliberate, strategic, and publicly symbolic, sending a message to Andrew, to the family, and to the world. No member, no matter how privileged, is immune when the monarchy feels its integrity threatened. Isolated in Wood Farm, Andrew now spends long days reflecting, pacing, and confronting the reality of exposure, the kind of exposure the royal family had long labored to conceal. Every corner of his modest home, every absence of staff or ceremony, underscores the extent of his fall and magnifies the weight of his solitude, while whispers of the secrets the royals tried to bury grow louder, drawing public attention to what was once hidden behind palace walls. Observers note the psychological toll. Andrew's demeanor, his routines, and his private musings all reflect the tension between a man who once wielded privilege with impunity and a man now forced to reckon with accountability, a reckoning intensified by the knowledge that the monarchy prioritizes survival over loyalty. The BBC interviews, court documents, and public scrutiny have not only stripped him of material power but challenged the perception of immunity he once believed in, exposing cracks in an institution that had long relied on ceremonial opulence, silence, and controlled narratives to maintain authority. Andrew's revelations, whether intentional or forced, illuminate a world of calculated erasure, where even the most senior royals can be strategically sidelined to protect an image that transcends any one family member. Every decision, from his removal from public duties to the cooperative stance of the palace with investigators, reflects a chilling mastery of institutional preservation, the monarchy placing the crown above the individual, crafting a narrative that conveys both accountability and consequence, even as it carefully manages public perception. For the world, it is a dramatic unveiling, a glimpse behind the gilded curtain, revealing that the rituals, honors, and pageantry that once shielded Andrew are not permanent protections but fragile constructs contingent upon behavior, loyalty, and the preservation of a reputation that centuries of history have sought to protect. As Andrew speaks, and as details emerge about his isolation, the world witnesses a convergence of privilege, scandal, and consequence, a convergence that underscores a lesson both timeless and modern, that no legacy, no matter how storied, can resist the force of exposure, scrutiny, and the unrelenting weight of truth. This is not simply a story of a prince. It is a story of an institution confronting its vulnerabilities, a narrative in which Andrew's fall becomes both cautionary tale and public revelation, forcing observers, insiders, and the monarchy itself to contend with the moral, ethical, and personal costs of secrecy. In revealing what the royals tried to bury, Andrew lays bare the precarious balance of power, the strategic calculus of the palace, and the human consequences of a system that prizes image over individual loyalty, leaving a man who once lived at the pinnacle of society to navigate the complex terrain of disgrace, reflection, and exposure. It is a story that challenges assumptions about privilege, family loyalty, and the inviolability of royal authority, one that will echo through history as a stark reminder that even those born into power are not beyond the reach of consequence, and that secrets, once unearthed, can redefine the public's understanding of both a family and the institution it represents that I am the quiet, rolling countryside of Norfolk. Tucked away within the estate lands of Sandringham, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, once celebrated as a Duke of York, now inhabits a world stripped of ceremony, titles, and prestige, confined to the modest, unassuming walls of Wood Farm. For decades, Andrew's life was defined by grandeur, privilege, and an unquestioned place within one of the most iconic institutions in the world, the British monarchy. Every step he took was observed, celebrated, and insulated by centuries of tradition, protective protocols, and the watchful guidance of Queen Elizabeth II, a mother whose quiet indulgence allowed him freedoms denied to ordinary citizens, and perhaps even to other royal siblings. Yet in early 2026, all of that protection dissolved with shocking speed. Titles that had long signified power and influence were revoked. His personal security, once a constant presence, vanished. The Grand Royal Lodge, a sprawling estate that had symbolized his status and dominance within the royal hierarchy, was taken from him, leaving only a remote farmhouse that offered neither comfort nor the stage upon which he had always performed. The palace's strategy was deliberate, methodical, and intensely symbolic. It was a clear signal, not just to Andrew, but to the world, that no royal privilege could withstand scrutiny when the institution itself felt threatened. This was a fall from grace unprecedented in modern times, and it came not with fanfare or public announcement, but with calculated quietude, a removal designed to erase Andrew from the ceremonial life of the monarchy while ensuring that the broader message of accountability and institutional survival reverberated across the globe. Inside Wood Farm, Andrew's days unfold in isolation. Gone are the lavish ceremonies, state events, and social rituals that once structured his existence. Gone are the protective entourages and the daily affirmation of influence. In their place, hours of reflection, pacing through the quiet rooms, revisiting memories of a world that feels simultaneously distant and yet intimately tied to his identity. Sources close to him describe a man struggling to reconcile the privileges of his past with the stark reality of his present. Where once his reputation was shielded by familial loyalty and institutional prestige, he now confronts the very consequences that earlier protection had deferred. Every action by the palace, from the removal of staff to the cooperation with investigators and the broader legal scrutiny, represents a calculated assertion of power, signaling that loyalty and affection, no matter how deep, our subordinate to the crown's need to preserve its image. This exposure has transformed Andrew from a figure of authority into a cautionary symbol, a man whose fall demonstrates that centuries of privilege and inherited status offer no immunity against public scrutiny, legal accountability, and institutional preservation. For the monarchy, his situation serves multiple purposes. It isolates a potential liability, communicates to the public that ethical standards are enforced without favoritism, and ensures that the continuity and moral authority of the crown remain intact. But for Andrew himself, this is not merely a question of legal or ceremonial consequence. It is the unraveling of identity, a forced confrontation with both public judgment and the private reality of abandonment by those who once shielded him. Observers note the psychological toll of this isolation, long hours spent in solitude, the disappearance of familiar social structures, and the absence of the very rituals that once reinforced a sense of belonging. Andrew reportedly experiences profound frustration, often revisiting moments of perceived betrayal and lapses in loyalty, grappling with the reality that protection and privilege are not permanent shields. Meanwhile, the public watches closely, captivated by the unfolding drama, aware that each revelation, each legal development, and each detail of his relocated life serves as a microcosm of a monarchy adapting to modern scrutiny. Polling data indicates a near-universal perception of his fall, with citizens divided over whether familial indulgence, institutional oversight, or personal choice bears the greatest responsibility. Against this backdrop, Andrew's narrative becomes more than a scandal. It is a study of power, legacy, and the human cost of being born into an institution larger than oneself. Every removed title, every vanished staff member, every empty hall or wood farm contrasts with decades of public ceremony and private influence, offering a stark visual metaphor for the transformation from royal prominence to a life constrained by consequence. The palace, in its measured responses, demonstrates a mastery of strategic calculation, ensuring that the lessons of Andrew's missteps resonate without destabilizing the monarchy itself. Ethical, legal, and social pressures converge in a singular story of exposure, isolation, and the consequences of unchecked privilege. Andrew's revelations, whether through direct statement, legal deposition, or public observation, peel back the layers of secrecy the royal family had long maintained, exposing mechanisms of control, influence, and erasure that were previously hidden behind centuries of tradition. As the world absorbs these revelations, it is clear that Andrew Mountbatten Windsor's life, once defined by ceremonial pomp, expansive estates, and unquestioned authority, has become emblematic of the monarchy's modern evolution, a cautionary tale that underscores the inescapable tension between privilege and accountability, loyalty and consequence, secrecy and exposure. His story is a vivid reminder that even the most exalted members of one of the world's most enduring institutions are not immune to scrutiny, and that the truths they hope to bury will, when revealed, redefine public understanding of power, ethics, and responsibility within the royal family. The Fall of Andrew, in its fullness, is not simply the story of a man. It is a story of an institution confronting the realities of modern governance, societal expectation, and the unrelenting gaze of public conscience. A narrative that is as dramatic as it is instructive, as personal as it is institutional, and as historic as it is contemporary, even as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor sits in the quiet corridors of Wood Farm. Each passing day serves as a relentless reminder of what was lost. For a man once defined by opulence, ceremony, and the unquestioned authority of royalty, the sudden absence of grandeur is disorienting, almost cool in its darkness. Where once he moved through rooms echoing with applause, historical artifacts, and the weight of heritage, now he walks halls silent and spare, the echo of his own footsteps a constant companion. This is not merely relocation. It is a deliberate unmaking of a persona carefully cultivated over decades. Every removed privilege, every stripped title, every vanished aid communicates a single, immutable message. The monarchy will endure, but Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, in all his former glory, is now expendable. Observers and insiders paint a portrait of a man caught between disbelief and indignation. His former world, one of endless visibility and influence, has shrunk to a life governed by routine, isolation, and reflection. Long hours are spent wandering the Sandringham grounds, pacing the farmhouse, and replaying memories of events where he once commanded attention. Sources close to him suggest that Andrew struggles with the reality that the privileges he once assumed were eternal are, in fact, conditional, and that the monarchy's survival takes precedence over personal loyalty. It is a transformation that is as psychological as it is practical, a reshaping of identity imposed by circumstance and institution alike. Yet this exposure is not accidental. The palace's strategy in isolating Andrew was calculated to achieve multiple objectives simultaneously. It communicates to the public that accountability is universal, regardless of birthright. It signals to other royals that indulgence has limits, and it ensures that institutional integrity is preserved even in the face of scandal. But for Andrew, these measures are experience a profound personal betrayal. The protections he once relied on, the security, the staff, the familial shielding, have been removed, leaving him vulnerable not just to public scrutiny but to a deep, internal reckoning with what it means to exist without the symbols of power that defined him. For the monarchy, the stakes are immense. Centuries of tradition, ceremonial pomp, and public trust depend on perception of stability and integrity. Andrew's fall, however, threatens to fracture that narrative. The institution faces a delicate balancing act: respond too leniently and risk public outrage and perception of favoritism, respond too harshly and risk alienating supporters who still view royal family loyalty as paramount. By acting decisively, stripping him of titles, relocating him, and cooperating fully with authorities, the palace has sought to demonstrate that no royal is beyond accountability, reinforcing the monarchy's legitimacy in the modern age of Andrew's story, therefore transcend personal scandal. It is a case study in institutional survival, a vivid illustration of how even the most privileged figures are subject to the strategic imperatives of an enduring system. His personal isolation, once a byproduct of scandal, now becomes a public lesson in the limits of entitlement, the consequences of misconduct, and the enduring power of public perception. The quiet holes of Wood Farm, the absence of ceremonial attention, and the stripped-down daily routines all converge to create a narrative that is both tragic and instructive, a modern cautionary tale for a global audience. Moreover, the implications of his revelations are staggering. As Andrew slowly recounts, whether to confidence or through subtle public statements, the secrets the royal family tried to bury are now surfacing, forcing the world to reconsider the balance between tradition and transparency, loyalty and morality. What was once private, shielded behind palace walls and centuries of decorum, is now public, examined, and debated on an unprecedented scale. The palace's former protections, the aura of untouchable privilege, have crumbled, leaving not just Andrew, but the institution itself subject to relentless scrutiny. The fall of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor is thus emblematic of a broader evolution within the monarchy, the realization that no amount of lineage, ceremony, or tradition can insulate one from the consequences of actions that clash with public expectation, ethical standards, or the law. It is a transformation that reshapes not only one man's life, but the narrative of the royal family in the 21st century. In watching Andrew navigate this confinement, the public witnesses both the human cost of privilege unmoored and the calculated measures of an institution determined to endure. Every moment spent in solitude, every reflection on lost power, and every revelation forced into the light serves as a vivid reminder that even the most seemingly untouchable lives can be rewritten, reproposed, and reclaimed by forces far larger than oneself. As Andrew slowly confronts the consequences of decades of assumed immunity, the world watches a slow unmasking, a revelation of truths long buried, a demonstration of the limits of familial protection, and a stark warning about the consequences of privilege without accountability. His life, once synonymous with ceremony and influence, now serves as both a cautionary tale and a mirror reflecting the evolving priorities of the modern monarchy: transparency over secrecy, accountability over indulgence, and the enduring supremacy of institutional survival over personal loyalty. This is not just a story of a prince stripped of titles or a man confined to a modest farmhouse. It is a story of power, privilege, and the unyielding mechanisms that govern one of the most storied institutions in history. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, once untouchable, now stands as a living testament to the fact that in a world of scrutiny, ethics, and law, no one, not even royalty, is beyond the reach of consequence. Each revelation, each moment of isolation, and each subtle exposure serves as a powerful lesson. The monarchy, ever ancient yet ever adaptive, preserves itself by demanding accountability, even when it means sacrificing one of its own.